and welcome to another episode of Forging Ahead, hosted by me, Mang-Git Ng of Anvil. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Todd Wood. He is the AVP of Digital Banking at Avidia Bank. Welcome, Todd.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, first off, I always like to ask my guests to talk a little bit about themselves and about the bank that they work at. So, would you mind introducing yourself?
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I'm AVP of Digital Banking here for Avidia. I've been here almost 10 years. I've worked within our retail branch network and have now moved out into my current role. The bank itself is located in central Massachusetts, where if you took a map of the state, we're pretty much dead in the center, right about 35, 40 minutes outside of Boston. We've got 9 retail branches, but we do business all across the country with some of our various kind of other business pieces we do. We do a lot of work in the HSA space between
Mhm.
individuals, brokers, companies. That's been a growing business for us. And we do a lot of partnerships and works with fintechs and in the payment space as well, which is another kind of offshoot of what Avidia has done in the last few years, which has been a really unique partnership for us. Kind of working with specifically around real-time payments and the clearinghouse, and our fintech partnership with our business partners at FIS, who are our core provider, that have kind of helped us,
Mhm.
through that process. So that's kind of high level about the bank, who we are, what we do, all that fun stuff.
Nice. That's a lot of good stuff for us to dig into here. But the most important thing is where's your accent? I don't hear your
Uh,
accent in it.
I'm a little bit of a hybrid. I'm a Connecticut-born kid, so I got a little bit of New York and Connecticut. Went to school in New Hampshire and landed in Mass. So I cover 3 out of 6 New England states. So it's a blend. There's no missing letters. If anything, we add letters in and make them up as we go.
Nice, awesome. And I noticed, you didn't mention anything about yourself. I'd love to get a little bit of your background, kind of how you got to a video bank, how you became a banker, and we can kind of jump off from there.
Yeah, so my original background is out of the big box retail world. So
Mhm.
growing up, got my first job working in retail. Worked with the Sports Authority group through high school, and then out of college, did some work in different areas there. Worked in their management group for a little bit regionally, and then going back about 15 years now, my neighbor at the time was an HR director for a local community credit union who was looking to bring in some folks who didn't have banking experience but had different type of kind of sales and I would say overall general customer experience knowledge. So
Mhm.
they asked me if I'd be interested. They were opening a new branch location. I went and interviewed and kind of fell in love with the banking world and kind of the ability to take my customer service skills and translate those over to a completely different industry that really at the time wasn't really doing that type of stuff. It was really just
Right.
bankers were bankers and retail folks were retail folks, and we've seen that change over the last couple of years. I think for the better. Where we've seen a lot of folks come into kind of the Avidia family from all kinds of different avenues, whether it's the retail side or different avenues that just kind of blend their skills together to really I think one of the things that we look at the bank is kind of how do we provide a better service, and
Right.
we talk about a lot banking as a service as opposed to just banking is banking. So again, came into the credit union side, and then got an opportunity to move over to Avidia. So it'll be 10 years in February for me,
Wow.
and I've been in love with the bank since I've been here. It's a great company. We've got great leadership from top to bottom, and it's a unique place, I think, within the community banking space in Massachusetts, because even though we've got 9 branches and we've been around for 100 years, formerly as Hudson Savings Bank and Westboro Savings Bank, we merged a few years back. But we keep that really community bank feel, but have a great leadership base to go out and push the envelope on the digital space,
Yeah.
as we can find a great fit for our customers in the bank. So I've always joked that I'm kind of a techie geek hiding as a banker, that really love talking to people. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
I don't know if those people really exist, Todd. I mean, I think you're unique in that space. So you went from member experience to now client experience, obviously from credit unions
Yep,
to banking, right?
absolutely.
Would you be able to talk a little bit more about how you view the client relationship as core to community banking? I know, especially given your retail background, working with customers in retail and then moving into banking. And then I would love to learn a little bit more about what is it about banking that made you fall in love with it. I think that would be great too.
Sure. So I think from that first question, I think the biggest thing, especially for the community banks and credit unions, is really the experience is really the big thing. It's everybody talks about experience, and there's a lot of discussion. That's a really buzzword I think across the industry is your experience better than somebody else's, or what do you have to offer? But I really do truly think that the community banks and credit unions offer that experience. Whether it's from the I mean, I'm right now in one of our local branches talking to you, and
Mhm.
I've been here for about an hour before we met this, and I've seen them interact with everybody coming in. They know most of the people's names. The people coming through our drive-through window. You have these great conversations, and I think that makes a difference. Same thing on our commercial side. Our commercial team members, you know, get to know some of our commercial customers like their family members. And I think that's where you see, not just in Massachusetts, but I think across the country, the community banks and credit unions really win the battle is building that experience and getting to know your customers and owning that relationship, just like it's your brother or sister, your mom and dad or whomever. So I
Yeah.
really do think that's the biggest difference. And I think that's been a change. I mean, they've always tried to do that. I know we were talking about that again when I started the credit union going back 15 years ago. Um, but I think recently we've seen that really develop into, and I mentioned earlier, we talk about banking as a service. I
Hmm.
think the days of everybody promoting that they have checking accounts is kind of gone by the wayside. I'm pretty sure all the
Yeah.
consumers know that banks sell checking accounts. There's no secret there anymore, right? There's
Yeah.
no secret that you can find a free checking account, just about anywhere. But it's what do you provide of value to the customer, and what resource can you provide for that customer that makes you different than the other community bank down the street, or the credit union, or one of the big five who are trying to gobble up all the
Right.
customers under their portfolio.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really great point. At community banks, maybe by the nature of the location and the regionality of it, you guys are just much more connected to the people that you serve. You're not just a number. It's hard for a
Right.
large bank to be able to provide thousands of different customized services based on region, based on location. When they're trying to maintain operations on a national and global level, right? So I think
Right.
definitely
Right.
that's a good point there. I think one thing I did want to ask you was with this relationship driven banking. You mentioned that people are coming into your bank still, people are going through a drive through. um, how has the limited contact as a result of COVID addressed this? And how have you, as a bank, thought about moving, maybe moving beyond face to face, maybe
Mhm.
augmenting face to face, or how do you deal with this new reality?
Yeah, so I think it's twofold, right? I think you have to know and have some patience a little bit to deal with your customers, because not everybody, and I think I don't have the exact number, but I think a lot of the community banks would say, we have an age problem.
Right.
I make the joke that banking is a lot like baseball. Like the average viewer in baseball was in like their 50s. I think banking has the same problem. Everybody for years it's been, hey, we have to go after millennials. Now you have to go after Gen Xers or Gen Z or whatever the next popular gen is going to be. But I think in the grand scheme of things, the banking industry in general is an older age bracket. So a lot of those folks still want to come in and see a banker and,
Yeah.
deal with that stuff face to face. Some of it's regulatory, in where we are in the Northeast, we've got a lot of regulation that we have to make sure we follow. Different areas of the country have more, or some have less, but that's still a hurdle that you necessarily can't get around with technology. But on the
Hmm.
flip side to that is you still need to offer for, the wider segment you're trying to reach, the ability to meet them in the middle. And whether that's through, doing stuff through email, doing stuff through digital signature like a DocuSign or other platforms, or um,
Anvil. I like
Anvil, yeah.
Anvil.
Yep, thank you. Or I was gonna say, even some of the stuff you guys are doing on automating some of that paper process. I,
Yeah.
banks, we got folks that I work with that have binders full of paperwork that go back 10, 15, 20 years, as long as they've been with the bank. They got binders for it all, right? We need to eliminate some of that and meet the customers where they're at. Is
Yeah.
really the big thing. So I think that's, to be honest, the big challenge, where the community banks need to identify that, and the credit unions do need to identify that, where the bigger banks are doing that now. They've been doing that
Yeah.
for a while. They've been using stuff like you guys are at Anvil and getting stuff out digitally. We've got to embrace that and understand that there's going to be ups and downs with that, right? Like we've to
Hmm.
work with your compliance folks or your BSA groups or whatever else and say, hey, we need this to be able to operate. So let's meet in the
Yeah.
middle. How can we make this work? Here at Avidia, we've done a great job. All of our teams have been through this pandemic great with working together, finding solutions. We've been rolling out Salesforce within the bank, and that's been a great opportunity for us to improve our communications between departments.
Hmm.
So I just think a lot of that stuff is going to have to grow over time, and the banks who are willing to accept and embrace that and understand there's going to be stumbling blocks where you might have some people who have been at your organization for a long time that don't understand things like chat and AI and the fact that you can make systems, especially with these fintech partnerships, that can do work that normally a human did before, and they
Hmm.
can do it at all hours of the night for a quarter of the
Yeah.
cost. Now I know that gets scary because people, especially like me, who have seen like Terminator and Skynet's coming. Like that's not what we're talking about. Like we're just talking about being more efficient. I
Right.
think through your process and supplementing, especially for the deep rooted community banks and credit unions, you're still going to have those relationships because those people aren't going away. But how do you support everybody else who's looking to us to provide that need, especially right now where everybody's trying to figure this out on the fly and no one knows,
Yeah.
what's going to happen in 3 months, 6 months, a year. I mean, depending upon all this stuff, I mean, we could be doing this a year from now. We could come back and you and I could have a similar conversation and be having the same hurdles a year from now. Who knows?
Well, you're invited to come back on the show a year from now. That's for sure. I will say this. Let's try to bridge the gap a little bit right now.
Sure.
You mentioned Gen Zs. You mentioned binders full of X. I don't think Gen Zs will get that reference. So for all you Gen Zs that are listening to this show, which all of two probably, um, go look it up. It's in the political history books. That's where you'll find that reference. But jokes aside, I would say kind of bridging this gap, right? At Anvil, that's our position. We're really all about bridging from the past to the future. And the past, if it's paperwork and PDFs, and the future being digital workflows and data flowing seamlessly throughout your organization, allowing you to work more efficiently. Um, and I think like you mentioned, COVID has definitely accelerated the adoption of new technologies that help move from past to future. Um, and so I guess I would love to just kind of think about between you and I, think about what are the impacts, right? You mentioned taking away jobs, or you mentioned doing the work that people typically done, but what are the upside benefits of something like this?
Yeah.
Does this does it mean you can do deeper relationships? You can actually spend more time with with each client as opposed to less.
Yeah, so I think the big answer to that is one of the things that's a popular topic right now. It's all around data.
Hmm.
The more data points we can get from our customers. So if I know, let's say, if you're going to open an account at Avidia and we're on the East Coast, you're on the West Coast, there's a time challenge there, right?
Yeah.
So that's a real thing. How do we provide the same support for you that I provide for Mr. Smith, who can walk into my local branch and get a hold of five people from 9 to 5 every day? So those challenges are going to be there, and I think the more we can take, I think the more we can provide that availability for people to access it at times that are convenient for them. And
Hmm.
it's not just time differential. I look at when you and I were talking. I have two boys that are going to school remotely. So my work day is different than what it was 6 months ago, where I was going to an office and working within a time frame and doing some support after hours. Now I'm juggling being a digital banker and a dad and a teacher, whatever else. And if I need banking help, it might not be till 7 or 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
So what does my bank provide me that I can do that efficiently? I don't want to have to, if it's 8 o'clock on a Saturday night and I lose my debit card, I don't want to have to put a hold on my card and wait till Monday morning at 9:30 for someone to get back to me and say, "Hey, Mr. Wood, we got your request. We'll get you a new debit card, or you can come by the branch and pick one up." Like That's what I mean by, I think, using that data to figure out where are your gaps, where can you improve. And now the great thing is, there's all of these fintech partners out there who are, you know doing
Mhm.
great work, and can fill those gaps and can help make those processes simpler or easier or faster. Um, and it's no longer like this big competition of like, oh, you can only work with one or two fintechs, and after that, like, your system's going to crash. Like, no, everybody plays pretty nice in the pool,
Yeah.
and you can integrate. We talk about using kind of a theory of like, we have a container, right? And what in our banking container do we want to plug in that makes our customer experience really great and really useful for that customer? So if it's hey, we're going to plug Anvil in so we can automate all of this paper process before, and we can automate it, and we can get that into our online banking system or our mobile app or our website or whatever it is. Now the customers can do it on their time, whether that's
Mhm.
9 o'clock at night, 1 a.m., 6 in the morning, whatever it is. I think that's the real challenge here as we get through this, middle of COVID, post COVID,
Yeah.
scenarios. I think that's where the real change is going to be, is how do you make that available to your customers? And then how do you use those data points to continually improve the process? 'Cause I think it's a lot of times we get stuck where, hey, we just rolled this out and it's great. And now we can forget about it for 6, 8 months till the next thing comes up. It's got to be a continual review process, review and improve, and just continue to get better for the sake of the customer.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think this is actually really interesting because, and I don't want to dig too deep into this anymore because I do want to move on to a lot of other very very interesting topics. But you mentioned fintechs a lot. You mentioned Gen Z. You mentioned a lot of my generation or younger is looking to these digital apps, these digital banking tools to be their source of financial truth. But a lot of times these answers can't be found on these digital apps. So I think there's a stereotype that we as a younger generation just want to interact over chatbots and apps and online, whereas I think in reality, I certainly seek out advice from real people, real humans. And how can a community bank like yours provide that real human interaction, that trusted, like, wise person interaction,
Yep.
uh, while also providing all the benefits of being able to get a new debit card on a Saturday night, right? Not having uh, people physically do those tasks. One thing I did want to, so we talked a little bit before the call, and one thing you mentioned was kind of the position of community banks and how community banks are able to provide a holistic basket of products to their customers. Like, a lot of these fintechs are slicing and dicing the market in a way that makes sense for a high growth fintech
Sure.
company.
Hmm.
But ultimately, at some point, I think you told me this or you mentioned this at some point, like, people age out. People have different needs. They grow older, they have different requirements, and these fintechs can't provide the financial products that they need. So talk a little bit about how you think community banks can kind of really fill this gap here.
Yeah, so I think it's a two-way kind of process there, right? So you're right. Talking about that, at some point, um, I really like talking to a lot of fintech folks and looking at those options because, like you said, they're kind of slicing and dicing up what they do best. So that's really great. So you can get, like an Anvil again. We'll go back to you guys, right? Who can improve our processes? You can get, someone who can do a really good job on account opening or,
Yeah.
a mobile app or whatever else. But then at some point, um, you have to have people behind those that really tie that all together. And as you see people move older, so people are going to move. All right, they're going to go away to college, or they're going to get out of college
Mhm.
and then buy a home. Well, Google can only get you so far, right? Like, you can only look up like ways to buy my first house, or any of that stuff before you have to go and maybe seek some advice there. So I think where the community banks come into play is we want to be able to provide the stuff that the customers need, whether it's a great account opening experience or a great mobile app or just a great
Yeah.
user friendly system in general, but then also be there, like you said before, as a trusted source that they know that even if they open an account in high school, they can keep their account with them through college and then come back to us. And if it's not us, maybe they go to wherever they settle. to another community bank because the community bank that they were at from the time they were 13 through 25 provided them this really great experience. So I don't need to go anywhere else. Let me go find another community bank that's close to me that can help me with my local situation. So I do think there's going to be this kind of interconnected chain down the road where the community banks kind of one benefits from another. So if there's a community bank out that's doing really great work, another credit union in another community is going to benefit from the work someone else is doing. I know,
Yeah.
we see that with a lot of, we talk a lot of other banking partners that work within the FIS core, and we have these great connections with other partners, and what are you guys doing? What are you seeing? And it becomes a real collaboration to try to basically be better for our customers. And if I'm talking to pick a bank in, say, Oklahoma or San Francisco that's a community bank, and they're having a challenge, maybe we're having a similar challenge, and we can work together on providing the solution that works for them, and maybe they open our eyes to a solution that might work down the road for us. So I think that's
Yeah.
I think as a group in the community bank space, that should be the goal, is for us to we want everybody to be in a community bank. Like, not to say that we're going to drive all the business out of the big players, because that's never going
Yeah.
to happen. But I mean, the goal should be like, let's get everybody, right? I mean,
Yeah.
come to your community bankers. We'll take care of you. We'll help you out. We'll help you get a house. We'll help you get a car. Whatever you need, we're here for you. And that, I think, is the real kind of gold mine of community banking, is being there for those people, and being there, and having a face that you can call. I know,
Hmm.
I talk to customers on a regular basis, and sometimes they're surprised they get a call from a human when they have an error, and they're just so happy, like you said, to talk to a person and not an automated number that you can kind of
Right.
hear it over those phone calls. So
Where you're just saying operator, operator,
yeah.
operator, and trying to get through to the operator as fast as possible.
Exactly, exactly.
Just a random thought here, because something you said triggered this in my head, which is the if you provide a great experience to your clients and somebody moves, which moving, especially the younger generation, they're moving around the country, around the world much more frequently than their older generations, and you've had a good experience with a community bank, you're
Hmm.
more likely to go to a community bank when you land in your new spot. And it's 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 collaborative competition in a lot of ways, right? The community banks are
Right.
competing to some extent with each other, but the regionality of community banks kind of keeps everybody at bay. But
Yep.
together as a community, let's say, you're competing against the larger banks, right? And I
Right.
think it's just really, in my mind, it's really similar to like let's say doctors, right? If I have a good experience with a small practice where I grew up, and that's what I've always known, and had a bad experience with a hospital, right? Like, I'm
Yeah.
probably going to go to a small practice when I go somewhere else, and I want to be able to take, and in this case, banking information, but in healthcare, it's my health information, and be able to transport it between systems, right? And that, everybody, I think there's a lot of talk about community banks kind of under the gun now, right? There's a lot of
Sure.
talk about community banks being in trouble, but collectively, I think you can view community banks as one organism, one,
Y-
and to get collectively, you absolutely can outcompete the large
Yeah.
banks because your clients are not numbers, right?
Right, exactly. And I think that's where, the community banks being creative, and, some of the stuff, I mentioned at the beginning, we've done some work with, the real-time payments network through the clearinghouse, and some of those unique things, and some of our partnerships with other fintechs to provide, whether it's payment services on our commercial side or whatever else. I think you got to find within your region and within your community what's something unique that, as a community bank, you can be really good at, and you can do something
Hmm.
different than someone else is. That's going to make you separate from your other local community banks, but also some of your other community banks in some of those other communities, where now maybe you get some of those word of mouth folks, either as they move out, maybe they stay with you because they can, right? Because all the digital
Yeah.
services we have allow you to basically bank anywhere in the world now. Or, you get kind of those, in the retail world, we always used to joke like those customer referrals are fantastic. It's one person tells two people tell 10 people, that grows out and mushrooms. Unfortunately, the reverse works on the negative side, just at a higher exponent, but
Yeah.
we'll leave that to the side. We're talking about
Yeah.
positive stuff. So I think that's where, the community banks really, want to focus on it, is getting your experience, really top notch, that really is great for your customers, and then how do you just continue to make it better and just try to over exceed yourself all the time.
Yeah, I think this is interesting because like community banks certainly have more flexibility, right? There's
Yep.
flexibility in serving their local community, flexibility in creating products that make sense for various scenarios. Whereas a larger bank, if you're trying to operationalize something, that's hard. That's a very hard thing to do.
Right.
Um, you mentioned fintechs quite a bit throughout this conversation, and I correct me if I'm wrong. I believe Avidia Bank is a sponsor bank. Is that correct?
We do, yep. We do some fintech sponsor work. We're really trying to be a good fintech partner,
Mhm.
because we know that there's a lot of challenges to fintechs coming in. Whether it's um, getting access to support or compliance or banking solutions, and I think you and I, in kind of the lead up to this, we talked about how at one point every fintech thought they were going to be their own bank, right? Like everybody
Yeah.
everybody was going to be a bank, and we're going to challenge the establishment, and we get this great thing, and then they realize that, oh, there's this stuff like compliance and regulation and all this stuff that we didn't realize, and we can't be a bank. Like there's no way we
Yeah.
can do that. So I think that's kind of been one of the things that we've tried to be helpful with the fintechs that we work with. And it's not necessarily a case where every fintech we talk to or work with, we bring on board because it might not be a fit for our customer base, but that doesn't mean that,
Mhm.
that they don't have a good product or solution that would work for other banks. So, and again, that goes back to what we were just talking about, the larger community at bay is, let's find the best group of, companies, individuals, groups, give them that access, get them what they need, and then we make that whole, the banking world gets better for the consumer. And I think that's
Yeah.
the big play in all this is how do we make things better for consumers long term?
Yeah, I think again this goes back to flexibility, the flexibility that a community bank has,
Yep.
and then how that matches up with a little bit of the technology industry hubris, I should say. There was an article I read a while back, which is every company is a financial services company now, right? And it was like talking
Yeah.
about how Apple is releasing credit cards and Google has Google Pay, and like
Right.
yeah, we're all. I think every company is thinking about the financial angle, but the reality is there, like you mentioned, is there's a lot of regulation. There's you need charters, you need to be able to actually operate, and
Right.
it's understanding the regulation and understanding how to run a bank is a core competency that a lot of technology companies just do not have. Right? We know how to write code, we know how to move
Yep.
fast, we don't know how to be navigate legal systems. I think that's one thing we're still learning,
Yep.
but it is something that is required in banking.
Yeah, and
um,
I think the real good partnership there, like you said, is the fintechs are really good at what they do, right? A lot of community banks don't have the ability or the budgets to go hire people to write code or do that work or whatever. So I think that's where having those good partnerships, right? You find a great balance where if you find a couple of fintechs that maybe you don't want to go down the road of being sponsors and doing all of that stuff, but you just want to you find a couple of fintechs that offer something that you can't get. Well, that's something you should be able to work out. Like that should be an easy discussion.
mhm,
And those are discussions I think in the past got a little scary for some because they just again they either didn't know the way to negotiate it. But now it's become so kind of commonplace for banks to partners with fintechs, and you see all of these, the FASs of the world and the NCRs, all those guys doing
mhm.
accelerator programs and getting these fintechs out to the banking market. I think it's a great sign of where we're going to go in that space and how those partnerships are going to continue to grow and be easier for the community banks and credit unions to kind of. I'm not saying we're going to jump into the deep end with the big boys, but we can at least try to tread water down there and take some shots, where we can.
Absolutely. No. And with that, I mean, I feel like time flew by. We didn't even get to talk deeply about the HSA program that Avidia runs. I know we
Yep.
last time we talked about go to market on a national level and how to do things more than just regionally. But I think that the big takeaways that I got from today's conversation, I feel like is uh, client experience, customer experience, flexibility of smaller community banks, and really leveraging that flexibility to build a product or provide services that your clients want, and distinguish yourself from
Yep.
the larger banks, right?
Yeah, and I think
So
it circles back to on the bigger scale of kind of, building your brand. If you look at throughout history, right? The big players, if you look at the big players, like you look at let's just say if you go to the stock market, right? The top five in the S&P 500, right? You're looking at, Nike, McDonald's. I just saw an article, Tesla is going to jump into the S&P 500, right? Those are
yeah.
all, brands that own their brand and they know who they are. I've got my a video logo behind me, my head. Like we do a lot of work around, making sure we know who our brand is. You mentioned our HSA program. It's our Avidia Health Network. Your brand is who you are, whether that's regionally, whether you expand that out. So that all is part of the service piece or what you're going to provide to your customers. So it's
Mhm.
it's not just enough to roll out great services. You got to make sure like people say or people know who you are, even if it's just in your community, right? If you don't want to go outside of your pocket of where you operate, because not everybody's going to be comfortable with that, okay, but do the best you can to be your brand, right?
Yeah.
No one else is going to advocate for you. You guys need to advocate for yourselves, and you are your brand. So just that's one thing I know that Avidia does a great job with that, and it's just one other piece that we always are focused on with everything that we do is okay. Okay, this is great. Let's add the service in, and now where does it fit within what we've done, and how does that kind of fit within our brand?
Yeah, I think so. I think your brand can help your clients kind of build some expectation. If they know they've had good experiences with you,
Mhm.
they will know that they can continue to have good experiences with you. Um,
Right.
Great. And so with that, I feel like we're running out of time, but I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today, Todd. Really enjoyed our conversation. There's a lot of good nuggets of advice in here, and I'm sure it will bring a lot of value to our listeners,
Awesome.
especially the other community banks looking to you know expand into new areas or do something that's slightly uncomfortable. I feel like there's a lot of nice little tidbits of knowledge here in this conversation. So thank you very much,
Great.
and thank you for joining us on this show.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Hopefully this is helpful, and I'm glad I could join.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.